For over 10 years, I couldn't get my productions to sound how I wanted, so I buried myself in online tutorials trying to figure out why, and even having some of the same tools as other producers and mixers I envied, my productions weren't coming even close. I've heard the term referencing get thrown around, and I thought I was referencing the right way myself, but I was totally wrong, and over time developed a referencing system that would help me produce any desired result. I'm excited to announce that you can now use this same system yourself in our new course, The Magical Guide to Referencing. This gives you the exact framework I've used and successfully taught hundreds of students through the years. If you're ready to stop chasing your mixing tail in circles and ready to understand any mix you hear to replicate those same results for yourself, you can find a link to the Magical Guide to Referencing in the description wherever you're listening. See you there, my friends. Hello and welcome to Working in Music Sucks. My name is John Maciel, and for almost 2 decades I've been working in the audio recording industry. I've worked with producers and mixers like Bo Rochelle, Joey Sturgis, and Josh Newell, and countless others on records with bands like Era, Census Fell, and Moose Blood. And along this journey, I've also worked with 2 of the biggest music educational companies where I helped thousands of aspiring engineers achieve their dreams of making music production a fulfilling full-time career. But as great as that sounds, to be honest, the first 10 years of working in music sucked. I started this podcast to talk about what sucks about working in music so others like myself who love music production and want to wake up every morning fulfilled and driven to making records people love can do just that. Working in music sucks, but with what we talk about on this podcast, it doesn't have to any longer. If that sounds like your cup of coffee, then you're in the right place, my friends. Let's get into it.
So in this episode, I want to talk about a subject that we all as creatives, mixers, audio engineers need to utilize, but always fail at utilizing. And I am speaking from firsthand experience on how I've screwed it up for a while and then got the hang of it. And it's changed and evolved. And it's using social media. Now, there is always a right and wrong way. And some would argue there is no right or wrong way. It's just do whatever you want to do. I do think that there is some merit to that, but I really think that if you need to know what the point of using the social media platform is before you even try to post. Because what I've seen and what I've personally done in my experience is like you see everyone jumping on like a trend or something on Instagram, and it's like, you know, showing off your gear or your studio rooms or like a trick, and you just document what you're doing, and then after you're done doing that, you kind of run out of ideas, or you don't know what to post, or you're not working on anything you find interesting, so it just kind of dies. And it happens all the time. Like I see it everywhere with engineers, and I know that they'll post for like a week consistently, and I know I'm like in about a week or 2 they're gonna run out of ideas, and then their feed will be dead again. Because I've run into it, and I can just see when someone's like going hard and then exhausted. And the thing with social media is, you know, as audio engineers, it is one of the biggest ways for us to get traffic and momentum if we know how to utilize it properly. And once you understand how social media actually works and not what you think by observing, which I did, you realize that it's all about consistency. It's not just about talking when you have something to talk about, it's about manufacturing things to talk about. So we kind of just already discussed the first thing that audio engineers get wrong is like you go and you make a bunch of things about something you're mixing or working on. Like you got a client this week, so you're excited, and granted you're documenting and posting and stuff, but you have no client the following week, so you don't know what to do. Now that's the first issue right there, is learning to pace yourself with social media posts, especially when okay, I only have one band coming in this month. How do I stretch that out? There's a lot of ways. You can write down a list of the process before the band shows up, while the band's there, and then after the band's gone, and write down everything that you think is going to happen during that process. And if you don't come up with a list of 20 to 30 things, I would be really surprised, because there's so many micro things that we do in those type of situations when we're dealing with artists that you can easily make a huge list like that. And for everything that you wrote down on a list, find a way to film or document that thing. And after the artist is gone, then start posting about it. Don't post it while the artist is there. Just document, just record, film. Obviously there's gonna be like fun little moments, post those away, but go back to your doc sheet and be like, okay, I have, 50 things written out. Let me go and like just take video or picture or whatever, and then I will post it after I'm done, so I have something to continually talk about. Post once a day for those 30 or 40 days. And while you're posting that once a day thing, go and brainstorm what are other things in the studio that I'm doing that I could write down. Like, am I prepping a session? What are the steps to prepping? Let me document my prep for this session. Am I buying drum heads? What are things to look at drum heads? There's so many ways to break everything down that you're doing, but we get in our own heads of like, it has to be this big grandiose thing if we're going to film or record it for social media. We feel this pressure, like it has to be as good as like what the pros are doing or some bullshit like that, when it doesn't. As a matter of fact, there are way more people further behind you on your journey than you think there are. There are hundreds of thousands of people who want to make their own records, who want to learn to record, who want to learn how to produce, and they're stumbling into figuring out how to get started and how to do it all. And there you are, already doing the thing that they want to know how to do. But you're so far removed from that journey, you forget that it took you maybe 20 or 30 steps until you got to that point. You want to talk about that stuff, as strange as it is. And the funny part of how it works is that when you document and you create social media based on this type of framework, what's going to happen is you will naturally attract people who are like, well, why don't I like this person's energy and vibe. Why don't I just talk to them? And I've talked about using social media before on this podcast, but I really want to deep dive into, creating content that you're, explaining your journey and how you get things done, as opposed to, it's like the most annoying content on the internet. And it's not just audio, like every format is just haunted by this type of content where it's like did you know that a DI box, blah, blah. And I've been guilty of doing this too when I first started. I like to think of it as like mini lectures, right? And those are okay for so long, but the content that really resonates with people isn't you telling them the answer. It's actually opposite. It's you identifying where they were in their journey, like meeting them where they're at. Like, think of it yourself when you were figuring out what DAW to go for. You've read an article or something that resonated with where you were at that moment in time for you to make the decision to just, pull the trigger and get that DAW or that plugin, whatever it may be, right? And it's really important to remember that you need to meet people where they're at when you're making content. And just telling people answers doesn't help anyone. Like, it's a short-term gratification, and they'll forget about you. But if you're constantly meeting them where they're at and guiding them to the solution, so instead of saying, you want to use a DI box so that you get the best guitar tone, instead you would say something like, I was really frustrated when I first started playing guitar and recording myself with my Focusrite 2i2 because all my guitar sounds weren't coming out how I wanted them to come out. And after going hours through a forum and figuring things out, I came across that it was the DI signal that was the issue the whole time. So I invested in a DI box to help make my guitar signal better. And guess what? My guitar tones got better. You see the difference between those two right there? That you're meeting someone where they're at, and you're creating a scenario that either you have gone through yourself and or they are going to go through themselves or experience in some capacity. And now they're relating to you. They're like, John just gets me. Like, I'm going to follow this person and keep following because their tips are so helpful, and they've been on the same journey as me. Why would I resonate with this person? That's how you use social media. And if you watch all the social media videos that get crazy views, it's stuff like that, and or it's like tips and tricks that you've never seen before, or vocal things of that nature. Like, there's just certain things that resonate with people, and it's really meeting people where they're at. What do people have the most issues with? And you want to make content about your workflow for those issues, but create a narrative around it instead of, reamping is when you send a guitar signal into another amp and then you send it back into your DAW, and there you go, you've got reamping. Someone's going to watch that video and be like, okay, cool. And they're going to move on. They're not going to care about you. It's going to be a slower growth trajectory because the people who will eventually follow you for that type of content, after, they've watched you for a couple of weeks, they kind of get the gist. Like, okay, cool. This person just gives me tips. They have no connection to you. And when we write music as musicians and we're creating music as producers and mixers, we need connection. We need the emotional connection of the music to connect with the listener. Now, how that gets lost in translation in social media is we get so used to just wanting to shout the answers at people because we spend so long trying to get those answers. We feel like we just need to give the answers because it took us so long. But you need to meet people where they're at, right? Now, another one that's really annoying, when people like to brag about their accolades, no one gives a shit. Everyone walks around with a "I'm important" sticker on their back, and rightfully so. So instead of saying, when I worked with this artist, we did this, no one gives a shit 90% of the time. And most people tune out because it just sounds like a humble brag, but it's like, get to the point. Like, why are you building up your like list when no one really cares, right? If you deliver with value first and you meet people where they're at, that other stuff actually doesn't matter as much on social media. I'm sure you've come across like other people on social media where you're seeing a short or a TikTok and you're just like, man, how does this person have 100,000 views on this video? Like, the information in here is not even that great. And then when you watch the video, you realize like they're all about meeting people where they're at and the value statement. So when you're using your own social media, again, lead with value first, meet people where they're at, and don't just lecture people. Like, really try to connect with them on an emotional level so that they feel a connection to you and they want to follow you on your journey. Whether or not they're going to, render your services or not, you're building a network of people who might give you a shot or tell their friends to reach out to you or something. But using social media just to like post like gear and stuff, that only goes so far. Like, most people are right now over that stuff. And that's just my observation. Maybe you feel different. Maybe you're like, no, I still like that type of stuff. Cool. Do whatever you want. Like, it's your MO. And like I said earlier, there's 2 trains. You're on the other one. That's completely fine. Some things to be cautious about that I have in my notes here is, I don't know why people do this. It's never worked. I don't know why people think it works, but like so if we're audio engineers, it's so counterintuitive because like I've talked about how you want to build a network, but this particular way of building a network does not work. I've never seen it work. And if it has, like, please tell me in the comments. But like, follow for follow trains. Oh my God. Like, drop your Instagram. I like to like follow and support you. And then to me, it's like, that's cool. But no one, it's usually the person who posts just wants more people to follow them so they feel better about themselves not actually doing anything, and they get more likes on their post, but they're not actually acquiring clients, bringing in artists, and they're not looking out for the people who are following them. It's like a very selfish endeavor. I've never seen it to where people are doing it and naturally engaging with one another and building an actual network. It seems like people who do it naturally don't ask for follows. They just want to help out their friends in their circles. It's just a really strange thing, and it drives me nuts when I see it because I've never seen it actually work. And if it has, let me know, because like I would love to hear at least one success story so I can stop talking about this. But with my friends, whenever I see stuff like that, I'm always just like, why are they doing this? Like, that's not how you build a network. I've never seen it work. So stay away from those follow for follow trains. They're just to make the person posting or asking about it feel good. And if I've triggered you because you've done that yourself and you're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, but it is what it is. And another way that, you can use social media, but I would be really careful. When it comes to humor, you have to be really, really careful with humor, and that the way I want to explain this, and it might resonate. Hopefully it does. So, Avatar the movie, biggest movie of all time. The sequel, one of the second I think it's the third biggest movie of all time. And people absolutely hate that these movies are the number 1 movies of all time. But I understand why they're the number 1 movies of all time. And it's not it's not the characters, it's the world, but more importantly, it's the themes. The themes are universal, and they translate past language barriers. The simpler the story, or the simpler the thing, the more it translates across. If you are very niche and specific, then you draw the window in closer. Or if your humor aligns in a certain way when it comes to like politics and other types of things, then it closes that window of opportunity, right? So when it comes to humor, you kind of want to think in terms of like, what's a broad scope thing that most people can laugh at and relate to? And example, like audio companies understand that. So most of their jokes are very, everyone can at some level relate to this joke because everyone has at some way experienced it. So when you're doing memes as a way to connect with people, just make sure your memes are representative of that, and they're not very like niche to like your dark humor or passive aggressive humor, whatever humor you may have that might turn some people off. And I think I've talked about this on another podcast, I can't remember, but you just want to be really careful about what you're putting out there. But memes, I've actually been really successful in memes in the past with like my memes just connecting with audio companies and other engineers who enjoyed them, and then naturally starting conversations that way that grew my network. So I do think that there's still room to do those. Now memes have evolved into short form content, and short form content is just the evolution of a meme. But if you listen to this episode and you have been guilty of doing any of the things about social media I've discussed, don't feel bad. I've done them myself. I've gotten much, much, much better over the past 3 years on how to utilize social media to strengthen my business, what I'm trying to do, how I'm trying to serve other engineers out there. And the more and more I really think about value first and meeting people where they're at, the easier and easier it gets over time. Because I'm just remembering, okay, where was I at this point? What would I need? What would I care about? All the records I've worked on, all the cool shit I've done does not matter. It is so funny to me. I worked my butt off to do some amazing things in my audio career, but talking about it will throw people don't want to hear about it. They just don't give a shit. And rightfully so. If I put if I switch the roles, I would feel exactly the same way. What? I don't give a shit. Shut up. Let's move on with the point. So don't get hung up in, I need to work on this record, that record. If you know a lot, that's good enough. It's like if you've ever taken a drum lesson, guitar lesson, bass lesson from the instructor, and they're so good, and you're just amazed at how good this singer, guitar player, whoever it is that's your teacher, that's teaching you how to get better at your instrument, and you're just blown away by their sheer talent. You don't care if they've ever sung on a major record, they've won a Grammy or anything. You don't care about any of that. Their talent and their way of breaking down their knowledge in a way that you understand is more than enough, right? It's more than enough. You are more than enough where you're at. You don't need to worry about getting that Grammy, getting behind that SSL console. As long as you are knowledgeable and your knowledge is factual and based on your experiences and you feel confident in it, meet people where they're at and lead with value first. So that wraps up this episode. Hopefully, working in music sucks like I always talk about every single week, but hopefully with what you learned in this episode, it doesn't have to suck anymore. See you next time.